Hey everyone, it's Jen Fishburne, and today I'm going to be doing something a little bit different from what I normally do. In fact, all of my videos are going to be different from now on. But what I want to talk about today is the end of the world. So is 2020 the end of the world? What is happening on December 21st? And what happened to the Mayans? Okay, so let's go ahead and just dig right in. So first I want to just say that I'm not an expert on this topic at all. This is just something that interests me a little bit. I thought it might interest some of you. A lot of people have looked at the end of the world throughout all of time, basically. It's been a big topic. And so there are many, many different ways of looking at that. So today that's what we want to do. So I used to think about the end of the world until I started studying preterism in the Bible. And when I started studying about the verses in the Bible that talked about the end of the world, I realized that most of them were actually talking about the end of the age and not the end of the world. And that made a huge difference to me, and I never looked at the world ending again in that same way. So the word that we have translated as end of the world is really aeon in Greek, which is age. I mean, it even sounds like it, right? So it's the end of the age, not the end of the world. So how does that apply to what's going on right now? And what does it have to do with 2020? All right. So let's go ahead and take a look first at, and I'm going to be looking at my computer a little bit here, and I'm not really good at this, so just bear with me. So we're going to take a look at some of the times that the end of the world has been predicted, and it's been not only Christianity has predicted the end of the world, but other religions around the world have predicted it as well, many, 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 many times. And I'm not going to go over all of them, but I just want to give you a brief overview of how many times that people have talked about this. So the very first one that we have recorded was actually in the first century of AD 66 to 70, and that was when they thought that the Messiah would come back, and that would be the end of the world as they knew it. And that's significant if you have studied eschatology in the Bible at all. It actually was the end of the world. It was the end of their age. And we'll come back to that in a minute. All right, so in the first 1,000 years, there was only a few times that people predicted the end of the world. The first 1,000 years of in AD, after Jesus, okay? So there was only a few times that people predicted the end of the world. The Spaniards and the French and some Christians and some different bishops and just various people had said, hey, the world's going to end. In the year 500, that was a big year for people saying that it was going to end. And all that year had to do with the dimensions of Noah's Ark. Who knows how they came up with that one. So, and then, of course, in the year 1000, there were a bunch of people who said the world was going to end in the year 1000. In the next 500 years, there were just a few people who said it was going to end. 1260 was a big year that it was going to end, and of course nothing happened there. And then in the 16th century, now things start to heat up and people are getting more and more anxious about the end of the world. And so we've got a bunch of people looking at the stars now. And so the astrologers are trying to say, oh, the stars are lining up this way, or the planets are lining up that way. And so therefore the world is going to end. And so it was just different things that people saw, right? So some of it was math, some of it was astrology, some of it was people, playing what I call dot to dot in the Bible and connecting all these crazy dots. The Anabaptists saw it happening in 1533. I'm trying to see some of these people that might be more well known. Michael Servetus. He said that the devil's reign started in AD 325 at the Council of Nicaea, and it would last for 1,260 years. That's the number he got from the Bible, right? So the world would end in 1585. That didn't happen. Martin Luther said that the end of the world would be 1600. Of course, we know that that didn't happen. All right, so now we come into the next century, and we've got even more people. Some people using the Kabbalah were predicting the end of the world. And then we've got Christopher Columbus. I didn't know that one. So Columbus predicted twice that the world would end. Of course, that didn't happen either. And then we've got just a whole bunch of people in the 1600s that were predicting the end of the world, or the beginning of the millennium, or the beginning of Armageddon, or various things that have that the Bible talks about. So they're all in there. They weren't the only ones. There were other. Every religion basically has predicted the end of the world, but Christianity has been the biggest one, definitely. Cotton Mather predicted it would end in 1697. That was a Puritan pastor, and that didn't happen at all. 1694 was a huge year. That a bunch of people were saying that was going to happen. We come into the 18th century then, and we see that Cotton Mather, he's still doing it over and over and over again. I guess three times is when he predicted the end of the world, and then he finally gave up. The sky was supposed to turn dark in May of 1780. And that was, I guess the sky did turn dark, and they said that it actually had to do with forest fires. So that didn't bring the end of the world around. Even the Shakers got into this. That was kind of interesting. All right, then in the 19th century, we've got a bunch more people. The closer we get to current day, the more and more and more people are predicting the end of the world. John Wesley did, Mary Bateman, the Millerites. The Millerites predicted it over and over and over again. They were definitely wrong. And so, let's see here, bunch of maybe 30 people in the 1800s. Then we come into the 1900s. The Catholic Apostolic Church, they were predicting it by the end of the time of their 12 founding members, by the time that the last one died. Well, he died in 1901. That didn't happen. The Halley's Comet we've got, that was happening in 1910, and they thought that that was going to be the end of the world. No. So we've got all kinds of things here. We've got in the 1900s, we started getting more groups that would commit suicide over this, so that they would not have to go through this awful time that they thought was happening, and which was sad, because then they just destroyed their lives, because the world has continued on since their suicides. Let's see here. Herbert Armstrong, of course, that one, he was real popular, and all of his prophecies did not come true. The Jehovah's Witnesses have done this. Jean Dixon has done this several times, has predicted the end of the world. Her last one is 2020, so she's still got another week to get that one right. Don't think she's going to make it. And let's see here. Chuck Smith in 1981, he was Calvary Chapel. Pat Robertson, of course, has predicted the end of the world. And we know that he's been wrong on lots of things. Lou Farrakhan, even with Islam, they've predicted the end of the world. Harold Camping, so he predicted it 4 major times, and then he would kind of revise his prophecies, and then he finally died a few years ago at age 92, and no, none of his prophecies came true. Marshall Applewhite had the Heaven's Gate cult. That was a spacecraft type of cult, and so 38 people, along with Applewhite, committed suicide. That one was kind of crazy. James Ussher, a lot of Baptists like him. He predicted it wrongly. Nostradamus. So all kinds of people. Let's see, who else do we have? We're getting close now to Y2K. And Y2K was a whole bunch of people, including Jerry Falwell, Tim LaHaye, Jerry Jenkins, and a bunch of other people. And so that's when a lot of people were really interested in the end times and really thought that that was going to happen. And I remember thinking that I thought the grocery stores might close, but I didn't think that Jesus was coming back then. But the grocery stores didn't even close, so I was wrong on that one. Um, so then there were tons and tons and tons of people who thought it was going to happen in the year 2000. So now continuing on, Pat Robertson continues to, and Harold Camping continue to revise their predictions. That doesn't happen. We come up to a few years ago, John Hagee, and he had his blood moon prophecies, and none of those really came true. Maybe there were some things that happened with the moon in the skies, but it didn't usher in the end of the world. So we can see that, and I really scrolled through these fast. There was probably hundreds of predictions that I was kind of looking at. I'm just looking at Wikipedia. That's all I'm doing. So you can look at that if you want to. But there's literally hundreds of people who've predicted the end of the world. And so one of them that's been interesting to me, and maybe was interesting to you, was the Mayans. And so the Mayans predicted it in December 21st, 2012. So what happened? What was different about theirs than some of the other predictions? Well, first of all, it was on December 21st. So that is the winter solstice, and we know that that is the end of a year according to a calendar, not a calendar, but according to the stars. So let's take a look real briefly at the sun, the moon, and the stars. What are they? So, well, we know a little bit about, what the sun does during the day and the moon does at night, and there's stars out there. But before electricity, the people, they lived by the sun, the moon, and the stars. They really ruled their lives. So the sun, of course, gives us the calendar year. And we can see the different things happening as we go through the different seasons. Right now in San Antonio it's 42 degrees, which is freezing cold for San Antonio. So I have to dress a little bit warmer than in the summer. It's 100 degrees every day for 100 days. And so we can see how the sun, determines our agricultural cycles and our weather and things like that. And the moon then changes every month about. And it used to be that people were very, very concerned about a new moon. A new moon was something that was very significant to them, and they'd have festivals to celebrate the new moon because it was a birth. And so the full moon was a death. And even now, many people are aware that a full moon can mean that people do crazy things, right? And then the stars. So we've got lots of constellations out there. And for us, we just kind of think, oh, it's pretty or it's cool, or maybe we've never even looked at them because that's not the world that we live in anymore. But they are up there. And the ancients used to observe these every night, the stars. What else did they have to do? They didn't have TV, they didn't have Facebook, they didn't have social media, they didn't have, so they would go outside and they would observe the stars on a regular basis, and they really ruled their lives. And so it becomes very obvious why the people before electricity, especially, saw the sun, moon, and stars as their gods. And they could see that these, everything that they saw in the sky, and they consider the planets as stars, everything that they saw in the skies as kind of ruling their lives. And we've come to a point in time where we don't think that that's probably true anymore. But I guess we should ask, is it true? What hold do they have on us? Do they have any hold on us? Some people look at astrology and they look at their horoscopes every day, and most people scoff at that and say they're so generic, it could just be anything. And I agree, it is. But what do we know about that? So what I want to take a look at now is the song, The Dawning of the Age of Aquarius. It was written in 1969, and oops, I'm on the wrong one here, by Fifth Dimension. And what they said in that song was, when the moon is in the 7th house and Jupiter aligns with Mars, then peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Now, that was in 1969. And I don't remember the song a whole lot. I just kind of know about it and kind of in the back of my mind. And so for the last, I don't know, 10 or 15 years or so, I've been thinking about the Age of Aquarius. And I thought that they were talking about the dawning of the Age of Aquarius at the time that they were singing this song. But when I go back and I look at the words, they're saying, no, the dawning of the Age of Aquarius will be when the moon is in the seventh house and Jupiter aligns with Mars. Then peace will guide the planets and love will steer the stars. So we know that the hippie movement kind of started the peace and love movement, right? And that's what was happening in 1969. All right, so let's take a look at some of these stars. So I was looking, for all this time I was thinking, okay, this has to be, the dawning of the Age of Aquarius has to be happening sometime soon, because there is something, well, let me back up. I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's take a look at various ages. So what has happened in history as we know it is that there are different things that happen under different astrological constellations. So we're going to briefly take a look at that, and you can just kind of look at history and see, but different things happen when there is a different constellation that's kind of ruling the sky. Sorry, my paper's flying down. It's ruling the sky. So we've had these different constellations throughout the ages, and it is literally called an age, and an age lasts about 2,000 to 2,500 years. So some people say it's 2,150. I don't think it's exact. It just seems to be approximately 2,000 to 2,150, to 2,500 years. All right, so the first age of these astrological ages that we know about is the age of Leo. And that was from 10,800 BC to 8,600 BC. So this was known as Leo is the lion, and this was the Great Golden Age. And this is when the Ice Age supposedly ended and the climate began warming up. Warming up means the sun. The sun was Leo, the lion. So this is the first time that we have really recorded history of these various ages. And so this is the time when they started worshiping the sun, because it warmed everything up and people were living. I'm not even going to go into anything about what happened before that. But the ruler of this particular time was Leo, the sun, which was the ruler of Leo. Okay, so this was basically a solar god age. As we go through these different ages, you will see that some of them build on one another. So they don't always leave everything behind, but they build on one another. All right, so we can look throughout history and we see a lot of sun god worship. Even still today, we see sun god worship. Whether people admit it or not, it's happening. This is also when they started worshiping cats, which was a cat was a particular form of lion, or a lion was a particular form of a cat, however you want to say that. And so this is when cats and sun worship began. All right, so that was our first age that we know of, right? So then we have the age of Cancer, and this was from 8,600 to 6,500 BC. And the age of Cancer was the age of the Great Mother, and it was goddess worship. So this is when women were in control of this world, and it was a matriarchy culture. You may have seen statues that date back to this time with women with big boobs and big hips, and that was what they worshipped. And so that was when agriculture and farming, building homes, domestication, all of those things about settling down became very, very dominant. And those are home and family are Cancer symbols, and that matches up with the matriarchy, doesn't it? So Cancer is also a water sign. So this age was brought in by great floods. And so all of those flood stories that we hear, that was the beginning of a new age. And that was the age of Cancer. The next age that we have is the age of Gemini, the twins. This was from 6,500 to 4,000 BC. And during this age is when they think this is what people say, I guess. Humans began to develop their intellect as well as language and written communication. So before that, all we had were just the pictographs that we had on the hieroglyphs and all of that kind of stuff, things that were pictures in stone. And so that's kind of what we had to go on. So now we're going to get a little bit more information as written language comes into play here. So in the age of Gemini is the age of the twins, and everything is duality. So this is the yin and the yang. This is the Adam and the Eve. This is Cain and Abel. This is Enki and Enlil. These are all the myth stories that come about from twins, but we see all kinds of things that are happening. We see the tree of the knowledge of good and evil with the tree of the the tree of life. We see good and bad. We see light and dark. We see heaven and earth, all of these things that are contrasted as duality. They could be opposites, they could be the same, but that is what that age was about. So that came with greater awareness, with intellect, the tree of knowledge and good and evil, right? And this was a time during that individualistic type of thinking began to come about. Before this time, they say that it was collective, that everything was done collectively, that human consciousness, as they say, was collective. I don't know, whatever you think about that. I'm just kind of sharing with you what we know about the different ages, all right? So that was the age of Gemini, and it was the age of separation between the two twins. Next, we have the age of Taurus. That's from 4000 BC to 2000 BC. And this is when money and banking were invented. So that was a key part of going into a completely different age of time. The age of Taurus is bull worship. So that's when we started having a lot of sacrifices of the bulls. Then also they started worshiping spirits, and fertility goddesses were coming up during that time. All right, we don't have a whole lot of information on that one. The next age is the age of Aries. And this is some people call it the Iron Age, when they started making weapons and had a lot of war and stuff. This was from 2000 BC to the year zero. And so we have a lot of stories and history and myths of wars during this time. So we've got Moses and Hercules and Spartacus, Alexander the Great, a lot of masculine gods. So this is now they're replacing the feminine gods. The matriarchy was replaced by patriarchy. So this was definitely the patriarchy age. It was kind of coming into it during the Taurus range right before this, but it was definitely taking over. Patriarchy was taking over in 2000 BC to the year zero. This is the age when monotheistic gods started coming about. So I know a lot of people who still believe the Bible, which I didn't go into at the beginning, but I no longer consider myself a Christian. So a lot of people think that there's been one true God, and this is actually where it came about, was in this particular age. So then, at the year zero, approximately to today, we've been in the age of Pisces. Pisces is two fish, right? What do we know about two fish? Well, Jesus gave the multitudes 2 fish and 5 loaves of bread, and that fed 5,000 people. So that actually is, Jesus is a symbol for the age of Pisces. And so Christianity was a major part of the age of Pisces. And there were other religions that were similar in that age as well. Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, and Buddhism have all grown out of the age of Pisces. So that was the age where they kind of got away from the war so much. And some of the concepts that became important during the age of Pisces is surrender or pacifism, compassion, kindness, charity, empathy, sacrifice. We know the sacrifice that Jesus supposedly sacrificed his life. So these are, and there were, of course, tons and tons of fish stories in the Bible when we read about the stories of Jesus as well. Okay, so what about the age of Aquarius? What is that? When is it happening? What is going on? So the age of Aquarius is going to be the next age, and that will probably be from around 2000 to 4000. Now, there are many people who are thinking that 2020 is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. So let's stop here for just a minute and talk about what happens between these ages. How do we get from one age to the next age? All those the ages that we've just talked about. So that's what we call a transition period. And the best way to understand a transition period is to look at the presidential elections that we've just had in the U.S. So we have, this year we had our elections on November 3rd, and then the inauguration day for the president is January 21st of next year. So that's about 2.5 months in between. So during that 2.5 months, if it was a normal election, and this year it was not, but if it was a normal election during that 2.5 months time frame, we call that a transition period. So the old administration of the old president is going out, and the new administration is coming in, and they're overlapping, and they're both in power, but they're both being thought of as very, very, very important. And so people are listening to both. And the new president, people generally tend to listen to more because he's new, right? But the old president is still the one who holds all the power, all the keys and everything until the new president is official in January 21. So this whole time period is called a transition period. And it's just different from the other time periods that we have during the 4 years of a presidential cycle, basically, in the U.S. And so it's just kind of, sometimes it can cause a lot of confusion, it can cause a lot of chaos. Sometimes it can be a very peaceful transition. This year they've talked about having a peaceful transition. We know that's not true, but they've talked about it. And so it's just a very, very different time period politically in the U.S., and that happens every 4 years. So this is kind of like a small picture of seeing what is happening with the astrological ages. So every 2,000 years or so, we've got a different astrological age, but there is a transition period between these ages. And sometimes, I'm not sure if I would say that it's an exact time of the transition. Some people say 40 years, some people say 400 years transitioning. Where I started learning about this was when I was studying preterism in the Bible. And preterism, basically, for anybody who's listening that may not know, preterism just says that all the prophecies in the Bible were fulfilled in the 1st century, and that the end of the Old Covenant age, and that age lined up with Moses, basically, the end of the Old Covenant age happened in AD 70 with the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple. That's the very short version of it. So there was no end of the world scenario happening there. It was just the end of the age, the end of the Old Covenant age. Well, that Old Covenant age also coordinated with the end, and I always get this mixed up, I think it was the age of, what did I say, Aries? Was before Pisces? Yeah, the age of Aries. So it was actually 2 ages, the age of Taurus and the age of Aries, kind of combined to make the Old Covenant age of Israel, which was the Israel of the Bible, the biblical Israel. And then we had a new age that came in the 1st century. So that new age was probably the age of Pisces. That we could see it starting to come in with Jesus and all of the stories with the fish and his disciples and all of the things that he brought about, new ideas of compassion and kindness and surrender rather than going to war and all that kind of stuff. So those things started happening in AD 30, we'll say. And then there was a huge cataclysmic event in AD 70 where Jerusalem was destroyed and the temple was destroyed. And so during that time, from the time of Jesus' ministry to the time that the temple was destroyed, there's a 40-year time period. We call that a transition period. So they're transitioning from the old covenant of Israel to the new covenant of Israel. And that new covenant, again, was just with Israel, the house of Judah and the house of Israel. I know a lot of people today like to think that they're in the new covenant, but that really had nothing to do with us today. But that's not what I'm here to talk about today. All right, so they were transitioning in the Bible from the old covenant of Israel to the new covenant of Israel. And there was a 40-year overlap. And during that 40 years, what we see is all the stories that we have in the New Testament are talking about that 40-year transition period. And that's what the whole New Testament is about, is the 40-year transition period from one age to the next age. So whether you call it the transition from the old covenant of Israel to the new covenant of Israel, or you call it the transition from the age of Aries to the age of Pisces, it is the same thing. The same thing was going on there. It just depended on if you were looking at it from a religious perspective, like the Israelites were, or if you were looking at it from a more secular perspective. And so it just depended on what you called it. They were exactly the same thing. So different things were happening in the religious world, and some things were happening in the physical world. So we've got earthquakes and volcanoes and hurricanes and tornadoes and wars, and all of those kind of things were happening. And those you can see, and we can look back in history and we know that those kind of things really went on. We see things were happening in the sky. So there were astrological things. Some people call it the Bethlehem star. Some people call it, there were astrological things that were happening at that time. And so then there were just, because so many of the Israelites were slaughtered, it was a huge economic shift. There were a lot of things that were happening in all of the various relationships between the nations, and I'm not going to get into all of that. But the whole point of that is that there was a big shift that was happening. They were going from one age to another age. I don't care what you call the ages, that is exactly what was happening. So now we get to 2020. What is happening in 2020? Well, anytime that there is a shift of an age from one age to another age, it's the death of one age and it is the birth of a new age. What do we know about death and birth? I think that both of them are very violent. They're violent physically, they're violent psychologically, they're violent, they're extremely emotional, they affect us in every way possible. So if we just look at our physical bodies, and if we see someone die, let's say they die of a heart attack. Well, that's a very violent form of death, isn't it? It's extremely violent to the person who has experienced it. A stroke is a very violent internally. You're not going, if you were watching someone else have a stroke, you would see a little bit, but you're not going to see as much violence happening as what's happening inside their mind. But it's a huge amount of violence that's going on. And it can actually, they can actually lose their mind, some of them, and not even remember anything before. So that's definitely very much of a death for them, and almost the end of an age in their own life, right? So heart attack, cancer, stroke, those are the three biggies that we've got here. So cancer is violent in a different kind of way. It's more long-term. But if somebody is suffering from cancer and they die from cancer, when they get towards the end of that, it's a great deal of suffering. It's very, very hard on the body. It's just a tremendous amount of violence. And I hope that I'm not triggering anybody by talking about these different things. Death is a natural part of the life cycle. We should be comfortable talking about death. And so if you're not comfortable talking about death, that's a whole nother subject, but we should be comfortable talking about death. So death is always a violent event, whether it's you immediately die in an accident. Very few people just die peacefully in their sleep. We all want to, but it doesn't happen, right? So then we've got birth. So birth is also a very violent event. It's violent for the mother, but it's probably even more violent for the baby. Can you imagine? None of us can remember being born. We've all been born, but none of us can remember it, but we know enough about it to know that it causes great trauma to the baby. That's why the baby comes out crying, especially when the doctor spanks them, right? If they're not crying. So, but it is very, very traumatic for both the mother and the baby. Even with a C-section, it's still very, very, very traumatic. It's just kind of drawn out a little bit more. So what we've got with the two ages transitioning is we've got the death of one age, we've got the birth of another age. And so that is a lot of trauma, right? So if we've got the death of one age happening, kind of think of like a cancer patient going through a long period of cancer. And we've got the birth, so we've got the mother going through the 9 years, the 9 months of the transition period, basically, the 9 months where the baby is growing inside her until it's ready to be born. And these two things are happening at the same time, and they're crossing one another. That's a lot of violence that's going on. Major, major, major violence. So this violence that's happening in the transition period from the age of Pisces to the age of Aquarius, I think has been going on for the last 40 years or so. Okay, so we've got the 1980s. Maybe you can go back to the 1960s where we had the hippie movement start, right? But you've got the 1980s, and then, so the violence is growing and growing and growing, especially after year 2000, we can really see it growing and growing and growing. And then as we get closer and closer, we start experiencing the birth pangs of the new year. So what's happening in 2020? The birth pangs. The birth pains is what's happening right now. This is why 2020 has been so crazy. And it is not just one nation, right? This is happening around the whole world. We've got COVID happening around the whole world. We've had riots happening around the whole world. We've had civil unrest happening around the whole world. We have a lot of confusion. We have a lot of, I don't know what's happening. We have a lot of economic upheaval going around the world. We have a lot more conflict, even though we haven't had outright wars. We've had a lot more cyber wars. We've had a lot more psychological wars. We've had a lot more government conspiracies. Whether you believe them or not, they're happening. And it's not just in one nation. They're all over the world. And different nations around the world in 2020 have had different conspiracies. We've had governments taking control over people's lives in ways that we've never seen before. We've had people experiencing sudden loss of their jobs and their businesses. It's affected people's health in all kinds of ways, not just with the COVID, but people have had significant health problems that have never had it before. I've had crazy, crazy health problems this year that had nothing to do. I take good care of my body, but I had crazy things happen to me this year. A lot of people, I've heard stories, a lot of people that's been how they've been affected. We've had a lot of the protests and the riots and, people tearing down our history, a lot of changes, cancel culture, just tons and tons and tons of things going on, things that we never, ever would have dreamed of even 1 year ago today, right? It hasn't even been a full year yet since all of this craziness started happening. So what is this? This is the birth pangs. When is the baby going to be born? When is the age of Aquarius going to start? Well, I'm no expert on this, but I've been looking for a long time. It has to be a cataclysmic event. I knew that had to happen because we see that cataclysmic event that happened in AD 70. That's the last one that we really have a significant knowledge of. We can even look back at a cataclysmic event of when the floods happened. That's why they recorded those great floods, whether they're in pictures or in stories or however they are. I think the floods really did happen. They may not happen the way the stories were told exactly, but they really did happen. That was a huge cataclysmic event that changed the world, and it ushered in a new age. So we've got things that are ushering this new age. And to me, it always lines up with the stars. Always. When I looked at that list on Wikipedia that I briefly went over with you, or maybe I spent too long on it, I don't know. But when I really looked at that list, I was amazed at how many of these predictions had to do with the sun, moon, and the stars. And the reason why is because that is exactly what is going on. So people have had a sense that the sun, moon, and the stars really do define our seasons in life. are seasons in history, are different ages. They know that. They just don't know how to define that, to describe that. And so I'm not sure that we know exactly how that works at this point. In fact, I think that we don't know very much about it at all. But I do know that it happens. And that's the important part, is that it does happen. And that's what's happening right now. So on Monday, we have an alignment of two planets. They are not the two planets that they talked about in that song. This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius. Maybe they got that wrong. I don't know. How about the Mayans? I did want to go back to that real briefly. I missed that a little bit earlier. So the Mayans predicted that the end of the world would be, or the end of something, their calendar went to December 21st of 2012. Well, I think that they got there. I looked for a long time. What happened in 2012? What happened in 2013? Nothing. There was nothing that could be, attached to that. I think they got it off by a few years, but that's okay because they're not exact ages. But they knew that it was December 21st. Why? Because it's a winter solstice. Everything happens on the solstices. This will be the shortest day of the year tomorrow. That's why people celebrate Christmas, because that's when you can first start seeing the sun actually makes the days longer. That's the first day that you can see the day longer. That's how Christmas started coming about, long before the birth of Christ. For those of you who celebrate the birth of Christ on that day, it's just a sun god birthday. And there's been lots of sun god birthdays throughout the ages, right? So remember, the first age that we have record of was the sun, Leo. The age of Leo. So they started worshiping the god. So I think that maybe something significant tomorrow will happen. I'm recording this the day before the 21st, if you see this later. But I don't know. It may not. It's not the day that matters. It is the period of time. And so right now we are in the period of time of, we're experiencing the birth pangs of a new age. So when people say, well, this is the end times, this is, we're experiencing the birth pangs. We're getting ready. We're seeing, we're hearing wars and rumors of wars. We're hearing about earthquakes and hurricanes and tornadoes and volcanoes, and all these things are happening. Yes, they are all happening. But you know what? History repeats itself. And that's all that we're seeing right here. In every age, we're going to see all of these things happen in that transition period. We've got the death and the birth, major, major, major violence. That's what's causing this. It has nothing to do with the Bible. The Bible records for us a period in time of going from one age to another age, and that gives us information about what is happening right now. So take that information that we've learned from the Bible, don't apply it to us today because it has nothing to do with us today. That was about Israel and their old covenant into their new covenant age, or the age of Aries into the age of Pisces, which was Jesus. Now we are leaving the age of Pisces, and we're going into the age of Aquarius. What does that mean? So I don't know that we can accurately know what it is going to be, but we can talk about some things that we kind of have an idea of what it's going to be. The first thing that I want to talk about with the age of Aquarius is that we are leaving the age of Pisces. That means we're leaving the age of Jesus. And I know that a lot of you still believe in Jesus and still believe in the Bible. And that's fine. That's up to you. But there are people leaving the church in droves. There are people who have learned about, in the last, I would say 40 years, with the internet age, we have had information at our fingertips that we have never, ever had before. And suddenly people have done a lot of research, and we have found that the story of the Bible is different from what we've always been taught. And so people are either studying their way out of the Bible, which is what I did, and you can see my other videos on that if you want to, or they are just realizing that, you know what, this had nothing to do with me, and whether they study it or not, they're just willing to just leave it. And they're walking away. They're walking away from Christianity. They're walking away from the Bible. Some people are walking away from God. Some people are walking away from just religion in general. And this last age, the age of Pisces, has been a very, very religious age. And I believe that that is what we are leaving behind. And as we leave behind this age of religion, there are some people who are going to not want to leave it behind. And in fact, many of you that I'm talking to today, you're not going to want to leave it behind. And I understand that. And so you can hold on to that religious teaching that you've had your whole life, because that makes sense to you and that brings comfort to you. But as you do so, as you hold on to that religion, as you hold on to Christianity, and yes, Christianity is a religion. I know you don't like to think that, but it is. As you hold on to Jesus, as you hold on to the Bible, the rest of us are going to be moving into a new age. And we're going to be doing new things. And you're not going to be comfortable. And you're going to feel a lot of volatility in your life. You're going to feel a lot of angst in your life. You're going to feel like there's no peace. You're going to feel like everything is wrong. And you're going to fight and fight and fight and fight for it. And that's your choice. You can fight for the rest of your life to stay in the age of Pisces. And in your mind, you can do that. But the rest of the world is going to move on, and we're going to move on into the age of Aquarius. And it is going to be a different age. And it's going to be your choice now what you want to do. So what kind of differences are we going to see? We're going to see, now these are what some other people are saying. And I don't know. I do want to preface this before I talk about that a little bit. I do want to preface it by saying that I think that as we go through the transition period of each age, that it's going to affect us both collectively, the whole world, and individually. It's going to affect us in different nations, but it's going to affect us whatever we do as we go through this transition period. I think that we as a group of humans, as we as humanity, have the power to set the next age on the course that it will go. And it has to line up with the vibrations, if you will, of the constellation that we're under, which is the Age of Aquarius. It has to line up with that, which is the Age of Aquarius is the water age, by the way. That what we do now is going to affect the world for the next 2,000 years. So everything that's going on now is going to affect the world for the next 2,000 years. We're not just talking about a US election and it's going to affect us for the next 4 years. No, this is much bigger than that. So this is my thoughts, that we have a lot of power right now. It's a very exciting time to be alive. It's a very scary time to be alive. But what do we expect? What is going on right now? So here are what some people are saying. It's going to be a lot more of the internet. The internet's very new for us. It's just started during the transition period, basically. Everything that the internet and computers and this age of technology is bringing to us, we don't really know what's going to happen. Tons and tons and tons of new things are going to happen in the next 2,000 years. Is it going to be good? Is it going to be bad? I don't know. It's going to depend on how we use these things. So some people will use it for good and some people will use it for bad, right? So some of the things that they say are the values that go along with the Age of Aquarius are going to be humanitarianism. That's not humanism, although humanism is going to be a part of it as well, but humanitarianism, how we treat one another, how we come together. We can see that we've been going through the greatest racial divide that we know of, definitely in our lifetime, so maybe in a very, very, very long time. Now it's going to come about to, when we get past this whole part of all of the hurting and the pain and the suffering and everything that we're going through right now. I don't know how long this will be, but when we get past of that, we're going to come out on the other end being closer, being more united, being one as mankind, okay? Knowledge, reason, innovation, and people working together for a greater good, for a greater goal. Now, we've been individualistic for the last 2,000 years. Now we're going to come together and we're going to start to work together. A lot of you are not going to like that. I grew up extremely individualistic. This is not in my nature to be this way, but I have also learned that I need to change with the ages if I'm going to be a part of this world, or else I can fight it. And that's not a good place to be. So I think that really what I want to say is the reason I want to talk about this today, the reason that I told you about this today is, and this is much longer than I thought it was going to be, is because this explains to me everything that's happening in 2020. This explains to me everything that has been happening up until 2020 for the last 40, 50 years or so. And this explains to me what's going to happen from here on out. It gives me hope This is not where we're going to, the world is not coming to an end. The age is coming to an end. The age of Pisces is coming in. The age of religion is coming to an end. The age of thinking that you are better than someone else because you've got your golden ticket to heaven and they're going to hell, that's coming to an end. All of that kind of stuff is absolutely coming to an end. And people are going to start seeing one another in a different way. We're going to start seeing the unity. We're going to start seeing how connected we really are. We're entering into a different kind of spiritual world, if you want to see it that way. It has nothing to do with the biblical world that we were used to of the last couple of ages. So you have a choice right now. You can choose to stay in that world of Pisces and stay in that world of religion in your mind, or you can choose that you're going to come into this new age. And I know this sounds really new agey, and it is new agey, but you know what? It's still true. So there are a whole lot more details that I could talk about. I don't want to. I wanted to give just a big, broad overview picture of what's happened in the whole world and to tell you why 2020 is important, why this is all happening right now. Maybe something's going to happen big on the 21st of December, but probably not. It's okay if nothing big happens. It's okay if you just go out there and look at the planets aligning, and it's beautiful. But this, I don't know how long it's going to go on. But if it helps someone to make sense out of what is happening, then that was my goal in today's little video. So I hope you guys have a great day. Have a great rest of your 2020. Have a mind shift that, okay, this is happening now, so I know that it makes sense. I at least understand why all of this stuff is happening, and I know that good things are coming when we get on the other side. All right, so you guys have a great day, and I'll be back soon. My next video is going to be about who or what is God. All right, bye.